So today's daf in Sechet Bava Metzia. We're close. I think 2 more days left in Ezer Nesha. Maybe 3 days. Is daf Ayin Gimel 73, and he said he got up to 2 lines in the bottom of daf Ayin Bet Amabet Tanura Banan. Miriam, is that what you're up to?
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay.
That's it.
Yeah, so that's where I'm too also.
Okay, so our Mishnah is discussing the last sort of issue that we've sort of been talking about for a long time, but directly now, what people used to do is they would pay money up front to get produce or something delivered down the road. And usually you got a better deal, right? Because you're, for many reasons, of course. So the question is that involve ribit? And our Mishnah talked about whether there's an established price or non-established price, yatzah hashar, and we'll get to some more details. But says the Gemara now, Tanur Abanam, 2 lines from the bottom. Hamolich hakavila mimakom l'makom. Let's say a person, which of course is very common in business, is bringing a container of food, let's say, from one place to another, right? You've got apples that you're selling, but in the place where you are, they're worth $100. And if you go somewhere where they're rare, you're going to get $200. So you want to take your produce to another city, sell it for more money. You bump into some guy, Matzu Chavero, you bump into your friend, and he says to you, look, I see you're about to head off on this trip. I'll do it for you. Tnali, give it to me. Vani elelecha, and I will pay you back. Kederach shmalim lecha b'oto makom. I will pay you back as you would have made profit in the other place. So give it to me here, right? I'll take your fruit to the other place. I'll sell it for the higher amount of money. I'll come back and give you your money. Now, of course, for me, the benefit in the person doing all the work is that he needs the money, right? He'll have a couple months of the money. But that seems to be like he's paying you more than the market rate here, right? He's giving the market rate there and he's doing all the work for you. So that seems to be a concern for what's called ribit, right? So it's called schar hamtanot ma'ot, right? Or agar natar. So it seems to be that you're paying him, he's giving you extra because you're giving him the money for some period of time. So says the Gemara on the top of Daf Ayin Gimel Amud Aleph, it depends on who's responsible for the food or the peirot while you're traveling to that other place. If it's Bereshut Mocher, if the responsibility lies with the Mocher, meaning if there was an accident or a fire or whatever, and it's destroyed, it's in the responsibility of the Mocher, then it's mutar. Because then this guy who's bringing it is not taking over ownership until he sells it. Once he sells it in the other place, it's worth $200. So he sold it for 200, he's going to pay you back 200. But if it's Bereshut Lokeach, if he accepts responsibility initially, then the time he accepted responsibility in the first city, it was only worth 100. And if he's paying you back 200, it turns out to look like ribit. So then it would be asur.
But you're paying him for the work he's doing for you.
You are, what you mean, the travel work?
Well, he's taking the produce, he's traveling there. So he's a worker for you. You're just paying him the value of his time.
Right. So it depends on how you arrange it. Correct. So it depends on whether if he has responsibility, then you sold it to him right now. And then therefore at this time it's 100, he's paying you back 200. If you retain ownership, as you just put it, and he's just working for you, meaning you accept responsibility. If it goes up in flames on the highway on the way there, who's responsible? And that's the differentiating factor. We are on the second line, James, the second line of Daf Ayin Gimel Amud Aleph. What about the next case?
Hamolich, thank you.
Hamolich perot mimakom l'makom. Same setup. You are carrying food from one place to another. And again, the presumption here is that you live, I'll pick cities, you live in Riverdale. Everyone here is on Riverdale. And your apples are very valuable in Buffalo, right? Might be the other way. But let's just say, right? So you're about to go travel with your produce to this other city where you can sell it for more money. Okay, you want to make money, but Matzu Chavero, you bumped into a friend, and he says to you, Amarlo, look, why are you going to Buffalo to sell your peirot? I have peirot in Buffalo, so give me your peirot here. I'll use them. I don't know what I'll make applesauce, and then when you get to Buffalo, I'll give you my peirot there, right? So to namely, give them to me. Vani elelecha peirot sheyeshli b'oto makom. I will give you the food that I have in that place. Now, this is a problem because this is what we call sa'ah b'sa'ah, right? I'm giving you a measure of food. I'm borrowing it from you in this place. In 2 weeks, when you get to Buffalo, I'm paying it back. But we said that wasn't good because the prices might change, right? So that should be prohibited. So what the Gemara says is it depends. Im yesh lo perot boto makom, if the person actually has the perot in Buffalo, then it's mutar, right? Because remember, we said earlier, and we're gonna have a mission as well, right? That if you go to someone and say, can I borrow a sa'ah of wheat and I'll pay you back next week, that's prohibited. But if you say to him, I have a sa'ah of wheat in my house, my kid is away, I don't have the key, remember that was the case, I can't get it right now, that was permitted. And Rashi said most places it was permitted mainly because the whole issue of sa'ah b'sa'ah is drabanan, right? It's not real ribit. You're not getting back more, and they didn't make a gzeira in that kind of situation. It doesn't look like ribit, right? So here too, if the person has the perot in the other place, then it's mutar. In lava, sure, but if he doesn't, that's regular sa'ah b'sa'ah, and it's prohibited. But now this is important, and it's complicated. Hachamarim, people who are I'm trying to think of a good word. It literally means the donkey drivers, but it means like transportation, like Amazon, right? Those who are that's their job. They're professionals at bringing food from one place to another and going to the higher market and making more money. They ma'alim b'makom hayoker ki b'makom hazol. You can get from them to give you back, to pay you the cost that something would cost in a more expensive place, like in a cheaper place. Meaning, let's say you're in a cheaper place, right? In New York, let's say, where the apples are cheaper. You can go to them and say, I'll sell this to you, but not at New York prices, at Buffalo prices. And they will take it to Buffalo and sell it there and pay you your higher price, even though they're giving you basically a price that doesn't correspond to where you are. They're giving you a higher price. Why is that permitted? You don't have to worry about ribit. My time, that seems to be clear, sa'ah b'sa'ah basically. But Rav Papa says there's a reason. It's because, and this gets to where things become incredibly complicated, it's worthwhile for them to be known as good businessmen, meaning they want to get into the business. And so for them to have your apples, let's say, and bring them to Buffalo in this very specific case, is beneficial for them besides the value of what they're selling it for. They're willing, Rashi understands that they're willing to do all the work of schlepping it to that place and doing that because when they get there, although they're not going to get the higher rate, right? They're paying you at the cheaper rate, basically, or the opposite, right? They're giving you more money. So they are giving you the higher rate, even though you gave it to them in the cheaper place. That's because they want to get a reputation as being sellers. So basically, because they're wholesalers, this is permitted, right? And the other, or else, Rav Ravika said, another explanation is nichlu de mozlu gabayo. It's better for them because they will then get a better deal in the other place. Meaning if they come and say, as every wholesaler will tell you, right? If you go to the shuk, I'm losing money on the deal, right? I bought this, I got it, I had to pay back my guy much more money. I'm not getting any money off this. They'll actually get a discount from the regular rate. And so therefore, for them to guarantee you the better rate is worthwhile, and they're going to basically do all the work for you. My benayo. Now, what's interesting in these two explanations, whether it's because they want to establish a reputation as businessmen or because they want to get a better discount. Ika benayo tagrachadita. What if it's their first time selling on Amazon, right? They're a new businessman, a new seller. So if they're new, then obviously they have even more incentive to try to build their name in the marketplace, right? And of course, it's a loss leader, right? People will often sell because they want at a loss or at not. And the Gemara does not say you could do it at a loss, just to be clear. That's a whole different discussion. Here it says you can do it at the same higher rate, meaning you can lose. You're basically giving Buffalo prices in New York, right? But not that you can lose money. But you're allowed to do that because you're new. But of course, if you're relying on people trusting you, no one's going to trust you if you're a new person. So then it would be prohibited if you're a new seller. Now, Bisura, there was a certain grain, I don't think the Gemara says what, but in whatever item, in Surah, Azli Arba'a. It would be, the price in Surah was 4 sa'ah for $1, right? It always goes the opposite of the way, it's not $4, right? It's 4 things for $1. And in Kifri, Kfari, which means the village, right? So meaning not in the big town. If you go out to the small village, you can sell this thing for Azlan Shita Shita. You can sell 6 for $1, meaning it's cheaper, right? So 6 for $1, you get less. You get 15 cents each one instead of 25 cents each one. So in the big city, things are more expensive, and in the village, things are cheaper, which of course is not a new phenomenon, right? So that was the situation. And Yahiv Rav Zuzi the Chamri, Rav, who lived in the city, he gave money to these professionals, these wholesalers, and kibel ale unsa de urcha. He did more than what we said you had to do. He said, "Look, go to the kfar, right? Get it for me for essentially the cheaper price. I will accept responsibility for what would happen along the way. Now, we just said you don't even need to do that, right? And not only that, I will pay you 5, basically. So I'll give you a little bit more, right? Instead of 6 for $1, I'll pay you 5 for $1. So again, in our terms, I'll pay you 20 cents each instead of 16 cents each, right? Says the Gemara, why do you have to do that? We just said you can give them the lower rate because it's good for them to do business. Benishkal Shita, why didn't he say, I'm going to pay you 6 for $1, meaning the lowest rate? Answer the Gemara that even though that was halachically permissible, Adam Chashav Shani, it was Rav, right? He was a very respected person, and he wanted to do extra. He didn't want it to even look like he's taking advantage of anyone and leading to rebit. So he actually, although technically was allowed to charge or to collect and charge more, basically, or sell it for pay less, he actually paid more than he had to in order to look better. Now,
is he reselling these things?
Is Rav, sorry?
Why is there an issue of rebate unless he's reselling them, or is he borrowing them and paying them back some other time? So
because what again, the whole case of, it seems, of this of sa'abisa, which means buying, lending basically an item and getting back the same item,
right?
Is that the rate of that item may change over time, right? Grain is not a fixed thing.
But in this case, it seems like he's just doing a straight transaction, money for the item.
Right, but the problem is that he's basically accepting. The question is, what price do you get for the item? So in the place where you are, in theory, the price you would get for the item is 1. He, instead of buying and paying 25 cents, he's giving money and paying 20 cents. So it seems
right. So isn't that just now? How is that connected to rebate?
So it seems like because he gave them the money to buy this thing for them, and they don't have to deliver the product to him for 2 months, let's say, or a month, he's paying them extra money, he's gaining extra money. They're giving him a better deal because he doesn't collect for a while, right? Everything we're talking about here is basically what's called schar hamtanot ma'ot, right? Because I'm giving you money now and saying, in 2 months, I need this grain, right?
I see.
What you can't do is get a better
deal. He's putting down a deposit, basically. Not a deposit, but
correct.
Pre-ordering.
Exactly. That's a perfect word. Now, that's our whole mission's case. It's called postin al haperot, right? You're pre-ordering is a great way to describe it. So you're not allowed to. Now, of course, we're going to see more cases where sometimes it makes sense, actually. Well, the next case actually is going to elucidate that a lot. Oh, sorry, second to next case. So the next case is a little more complicated. Rabasi asked Rabbi Yochanan the following question. Can you say that this whole thing applies not just to things like grain? I used apples, but the point is things that are common, that you're constantly trading in. What if it's grutaot? Grutaot are literally means little small pieces of metal, right? So, but like junk, right? What if somebody's selling things, and the explanation Rashi gives here is that these are things that are not sold over and over, right? You need to buy a spare tire, you go to the junkyard, right? So, but you don't need one every week kind of thing. So it's not like grain or, a commodity that you're constantly doing. And so the question is,
Rashi says it could be pieces of gold or silver. And we had a whole discussion about gold and silver as well.
But not correct. But this is junk again. Gruto means like the shavings, like the tiny little, little bits that you have at the bottom after you cut something up. Scrap. Thank you. That's a good word. Okay. Not junk. Junk sounds wrong. Okay. Thank you. So, but that's what I meant. So, but it's not necessarily metal. Just the point is these are things that are irregular, right? You go into the place and say, I need some shavings of silver, but what are the odds you're going to come do that next week? In which case the question is, are you sort of, the whole point we made was to establish someone as a businessman, they're willing to take more risk or more loss. And that's not considered to be rebit because that's part of normal business. But what if you're selling something in which there's not a regular market, right? So, which unlikely the person's going to come again for the same thing. So Amar Lei, so he answered him, look, there was a case where Rabbi Yishmael, Rabbi Yossi wanted to do something similar by clay pishtan, right? They're clothing that people made that in the city got a certain price. In another city or in a village, they got a higher price, right? Or they're the opposites, right? They're lower price. So you can buy more with the same amount of money, right? So instead of buying 4 shirts, with this money, you could buy 6 shirts. And the question was, is that considered to be rebit? Because clay pishtan are not as regularly traded as grain, right? Because back in those days, at least, you didn't necessarily get new clothes all the time, right? So is it true about that as well? And answer the Gemara, Lo hinichu Rebbe. Rebbe did not allow him to do it. Rebbe said this is only permitted if it's something like grain, where there's a regular market and there's benefit to being a wholesaler of that. But if you're selling something that they bought irregularly, which in their case was Kli Pishtan, obviously it might not be true today, that would not be permitted. And Ikadamri, some say that the names are a little different. There's a couple different Girsaot here, but ours in front of us is Bikesh Rebbe Lasot Gruta Otkein. Rebbe wanted to do it not about Kli Pishtan, but about the metal scraps. V'hanichu Rabbi Shmuel Rabbi Yossi, and Rabbi Shmuel Rabbi Yossi did not let him. There's a different girsa in the Mesorah Shas with Rabbi Yochanan, but the same halacha is true. So that basically this is confined, which you could see how complex this gets, right? It's confined to cases where we believe that it's likely that the businessman or the trader is going to gain from the transaction, not if he's not going to gain from it. Now, the next case, which gets to what James raised earlier, what I was referring to, is what about Pardesa? A case of a vineyard, right? Pardes is a vineyard, right? So let's say, and it was pretty common, a person would, I guess a wealthy person would walk over to a vineyard and say, Rashi explains, talking about when the grapes are growing, they're not harvested yet, but they're growing, and say, look, your vineyard, I'll buy out your whole vineyard, right? I'll buy the product, I'll get all the wine, which is a great deal for someone, right? Who's a farmer who needs money. But obviously you're going to get a good deal, right? I'm not going to pay you so if you waited till the grapes matured and they went out to market, you could make $1,000. I'll give you $500. You don't have to worry about anything, right? So that is exactly this case. I'm giving you money now. In 2 months, I'm going to get all the grapes from your field. I'm getting a pretty good deal here. Am I getting a good deal because I gave you money, which looks like schar agan natar, or not? So Rav said it's prohibited. You can't do that. If you're paying less than the market rate, eventually, then it's prohibited. And Shmuel
said, this is different because it's a futures deal also, and the grapes could never mature and they could just
the Gemara's going to talk about
totally disappear.
Correct. Shmuel said it's permitted. Shari says the Gemara, Rav said it's prohibited because look, since the grapes are already growing, so Rav's differentiating between a futures deal where there's nothing there, which is clearly futures, but here kivan delikame. Because since in the like means when it's coming up in the future, shav yitfei, the grapes from this vineyard are going to be worth more than the $500 I'm paying you. Then it's mitchazi ki agar natarle. It looks like I'm giving you agar, a profit for waiting, right? Meaning I'm giving you cash now. 2 months I'm going to get my product, and the reason I'm getting a good deal is because I gave you money. And Shmuel says it's permitted because of what James just said. Kivan dahavi beit tivaha. Since there could be, Rashi says the word tiva comes from the word like amazed, meaning mistakes. There could be unexpected things happening, right? Which is very common, of course. Toher, Rashi says, right? Because unexpected things could happen. Anything could go wrong with this harvest, and you could lose the grapes, etc. Lo michaze ki agar natole. You're taking a lot of risk, right? And since the person who's buying it took a lot of risk, everyone understands that that's why he's got a better deal, right? And says Rav Shimi Bar Chia, Mode Rav. Rav would admit, Bitore, if you're talking about a field that there's actually two ways to understand this. But one understanding is that if you're talking about, Rashi says, if you're talking about a place where they used animals to harvest the field, right? So basically they had, instead of being by human, I guess, they would line up these great big, wagons and pull their shvarim, would pull through the field in order to help with the harvest, right? So in those cases, basically, there's a lot of damage that happens, right? The wagon goes a little bit off, it crushes all the trees, or because there's so much industrial machinery there, and there's a very high risk of damage, Rav would admit that the person who's paying upfront is taking a lot of risk. And because they're taking a lot of risk, it's not considered to look like ribit, right? So Rav would admit in that case that Bitore, the nafesh pseidayu, that there's a lot of risk of loss, and therefore it's permitted. Again, it sounds in this Gemara, this obviously the line between these two things is very, very complex, right? It sounds because what's considered to be an acceptable upfront payment? Who decides what that is, right? So our Gemara seems to be saying, at least Rav is saying, you can't say anything. But if it's a circumstance in which it's apparent that there's a very high risk there's a high risk taken by the buyer, then it's okay to give him a good deal. Again, who defines what a high risk is? What's a good deal? When does it look like ribit? And remember, all of this is really appearances, right? This is not ribit d'oraita, which is where you say, I'm going to borrow 1,000 and give you 2,000. So Rav seems to paskin that there's some gray zone there. And if it's Possible damage, it's a problem, but if it's likely damage, it's not a problem.
But why is there even, we're talking about a sale. He's purchasing this product. He said, when it comes to market, I'm buying 2,000 bushels of this, or I'm buying for 40,000 grapes. And that's what I'm buying. This is the price I'm giving you.
So the problem is that when it comes to market, what you ended up paying is much lower than the real price. So 2 months from now, when these grapes come in, you're going to go and say, I paid $2,000. I can resell this today for 10,000, right? And so it looks like, why did you get such a good price? Because since I paid 2 months ahead of time, I forwarded him the money, but that's what we call a loan, right? So it appears if you're paying money for delivery later, that's what our whole discussion is. I'm giving you money up front for delivery later. If I get a better deal on that delivery, it looks like you're being paid to hold on to get the money 2 months ahead of time, right? And that's called schar agar natar. There's literally the words in Aramaic. Payment value for waiting on the wages, basically, right? So that's the whole discussion in question. Now, Amrlu Shmuel Lahanu de Shipshi Shabsha.
But if the product exists now, isn't that important too? That if there's a product, so we had a Mishnah earlier where they wanted to exchange wheat for wine. The person didn't have the wheat. So as long as the wine was on the market, that was acceptable. If he could go to his neighbor, go to a friend, as long as he could get it. So here, if there are grapes, if he could see their grapes in the field, this is the price that they get. They do exist.
But there's no market yet for this thing, right? The grapes, there isn't a market yet. That's the whole problem.
Oh, you're saying there's no market yet.
Right, because they're still growing, right? It hasn't finished growing yet. I don't think at least in Argamar, it doesn't seem like they had a market for unripe grapes, right? They had a market once it was done. As you said, and this was our Mishnah yesterday, the whole question about when they're finished growing, right? Do you have to own them? Do you have to, someone else has them? That was our part of our Mishnah. We're going to discuss it much more tomorrow about what's considered to be finalized in the market. But here, this is 2 months before there's any market. This is clearly long before there's going to be any harvesting of grapes. So you're just taking risk in the future.
So they can't establish their own market between them then?
I guess, right. So I don't think so. No, is the short answer. Whether that would be different today, where the world's much bigger and there's a bigger market, it might be different. And I can't comment on how we treat futures today when there could be futures for anything, right? So anyways, Amrlu Shmuel Lahanu de Shabshi Shipsha. Shmuel said to people in his neighborhood who were purchasing Shipsha are like grapevines, right? So they're purchasing the vines, and what they do, right, is that they pay money today. One day when it's harvested, they're going to get everything on the field, right? And so here, Rashi answers a couple of different explanations here, but one challenge here is that after it gets harvested, basically, then it's processed and then, it's collected, it goes to the market. But because here there seems to be a relatively low risk of what's it called? So sorry, no, I got the case wrong. This case is a little different. This case is you're giving.
Rashi talks about a sharecropper, giving it to a sharecropper.
Correct. So
what does it mean here? Why is he giving it to the sharecropper?
You are the owner, not necessarily the owner of this land, but you own something. And you basically give the sharecropper a bag of wheat, let's say, of grain, to plant in the ground, right? And when they plant the ground, it might be, let's say, your field or not your field, they're going to, grow a lot of grain. They give half of it to the owner of the field, half they keep, whatever the deal is for the sharecropper. And then in the harvest, they give you back a bag of grain that you gave them to plant, right? So they're paying you back not only whatever they need from a sharecropping, but they pay you the cost of the seeds that you forwarded to them, right? So that seems to be a real bit of a problem because that's essentially sa'a b'sa'a, right? You gave them a bag of grain. 3 months later at the harvest, they're giving you back another bag of grain, right? So says Shmuel, you know what he told these people? You know what you should do? Sorry, let me find it in time. Shmuel said, Hafochu ba'ara, you should go, you who lent the grain, work a little bit on the ground with the sharecropper. Kihecha dekana lechu gufa da'ara, so that you also have invested something in the land, right? Even though it's a little complicated about what this means, most say it's just symbolic, right? Meaning the whole issue of sa'a b'sa'a is that it looks like ribit, but if you start doing things and showing that you're quote unquote a partner, even though you're not really a partner, you're not really a sharecropper here, and you're not going to get any of the produce of the land. But once you start working the land, it's sort of a nikar, it's a siman that you're invested in this thing along with the sharecropper. The elo, but if you don't do that, then it appears like a loan and usher, and then I would prohibit you from giving them a bag of grain to plant in order to get back a bag of grain. Rava said something very similar concept to those who watched the fields. So mintru bagi, they were people who guarded the fields. Bagi are the fields, and what basically would happen is that they were not paid initially. Right, they would watch the field the whole summer, let's say, and they were not paid until the harvest happened. The grain was processed, and then they got a bag of whatever their agreement was. Right, I'll watch it for 3 months, and I'll get 3 bushels of grain. But said Rava, because there's a period of time after you stop watching the crops before you get paid, right? It looks like you're being paid basically extra because you waited for time to collect your wages. So therefore, said Rava to these people, Huku hafocha bebeidari, go out and help turn over some of the crops in the threshing floor. Meaning not a lot, just do like a symbolic thing to be part of the action. So that your work does not finish until that time. Meaning, if you stopped working when the field was harvested and you waited a month to get paid, that month would make problems for whether you're being paid too much. So during that time, go to the threshing floor, continue to work a little bit, turn on the lights so that you're still working. And because your wages are only due for you at the end of the job. And so at the end of the job, then he can pay you whatever he wants to pay you, right? There, by the end of the job, he's giving you whatever price he wants to give you, and it's cheaper for him, basically. He can pay you anything he wants to pay you, right? But the point is that if there's a separation between when you finish the job and when you get paid, it looks like you're getting paid extra because you waited that time.
So seasonal workers technically could be paid later. They didn't have to be paid as they were doing the job.
Correct. As long as you're still working, right? So that's his point. If the job is over and then you wait a month, then that's where you get into problems. But if you still are quote unquote in the job because you're showing up once in a while, then it's not a problem. You can be paid whatever you want to be paid, kind of thing.
What is the problem with waiting? The land is just the products grow on their own, and after that,
the problem with waiting is that technically, let's say you finish watching it on August 1st, right? And he pays you on September 1st. So if a wage agreement with him was 5 bushels of grain, then technically on August 1st, when you finished your job, he now owes you 5 bushels of grain, right? And he's not paying, so you essentially lent to the owner your 5 bushels and you got paid them back September 1st. So that's sa'ah b'sa'ah. You basically lent him your bushels for an extra month because he owed you money on that day. He doesn't pay you till he gets the final product. And so you're not allowed to do it. Again, if it was a cash deal, it wouldn't be a problem at all. Right? We never have this problem with cash. We only have this problem with commodities, but because I guess the nature of their payment was that they were paid in commodities, that's why Rav instructed them to stay in the deal, so to speak, during that time.
But what's the concern of that month? That there were more product would grow, or the shar would change, or
that it changes in value. That on August 1st it would have been $1,000 worth, and on September 1st it's $2,000, so you're making more money. And remember, sa'ah is a problem even if the shar doesn't change because it looks like it might change. You know what I mean? It's a risk involved. Amr le Rabbanan the Rava, 7 lines from the bottom. The Rabbanan said to Rava, ka'achol maribit. I think, said the Rabbanan to Rava, they came and accused Rava of unfair business practices. You're getting interest. Why? The kuli ama shakli arba'a. Every other person who has sharecroppers in the neighborhood, the going rate, right, is that they pay 4, right? They pay, they get paid, sorry. You own a field, Rava owned a field, you give it to sharecropper. Everywhere else, the sharecroppers, their payment for renting the field or for using the field is 4 sa'ah, let's say, right? Actually, I think 4 core of grain. And the owners kicked them off the field in Nisan, right after the harvest comes, right? Mar, you, Rava, your practice, we know, is natar luhu ad iyar. You let the sharecroppers, or you make the sharecroppers stay until iyar, and they don't pay you, right? The sharecroppers pay the owner of most fields in Nisan. Your sharecroppers don't pay you till iyar, which means you're giving them an extra month to pay, but then you're taking 6 from them, shekel shita. So it seems like by giving them an extra month to pay, you're making them pay extra, which seems to be rebate. Amarlu, and he said to him, no, you guys don't understand the business at all. Aton kav ditan shalokadin. You're the one, everyone else is the ones doing injustice in their business. Because look, ara la'aris mishtabi. when you give a sharecropper your land, it's not up to you when you kick them off. They're allowed to stay on the land as long as they work the land, right? So by picking an arbitrary date that the season is over, the land is really meshubad to the aris, right? You guys kick them out in Nisan. It's not over yet. The harvest is mostly done by Nisan, but there's certainly some crops that are still growing, right? The late growth. And there, because you kick them out, you're making them lose a little bit of amount, right? They're losing whatever grain grew during the time from Nisan till Iyar. But Anna, I am kinder, and the Tarnalu Adiyar, I let them stay until Iyar, until they want to stay, and therefore they gain more, and they're willing to pay me more. They profit a certain amount because I let them stay longer. So basically, I'm not getting extra money because I let them pay me later. I'm getting extra money because I let them gain more from the field, and that would be totally permitted. So the way you have it is completely wrong. Says the turn.
Well, that's up to the individual, the arrangement, right? He could let them stay till Sivan, or he could let them to whatever he wants. Each is there a set rule in this community?
I mean, so I don't know, but it would have to be something truly beneficial, right? He can't say to them, "Oh, stay till December and don't pay me till then and pay me extra," because obviously no crops grow between July and December, right? So it has to be something that is real, right? It can't just be artificial. But that's what Rava was saying, that I'm actually giving them real benefit. I'm not.
No, I understand that to December, but let's say he lets him take Sivan and Tammuz and crops are still growing. He can have that deal, can't he?
In theory, but I'm not so sure that much grows in Sivan and Tammuz.
Okay.
Says the Gemara on Daf Ayin Gimel Bet. Rav Mari Baruch. Now, Rav Mari Baruch was a person we've had before. Rashi here quotes a version of the story that he doesn't always quote the same one. That he was named after his mother because his mother was Shmuel's daughter, so he was a grandson of Shmuel. But his mother was kidnapped and raped. And elsewhere, Rashi doesn't say that here, but elsewhere Rashi says that. But had a child, not someone she was married to, and not by choice. And then ultimately his father did convert, the Gemara says elsewhere, but the bottom line is they named him after his mother because his father wasn't Jewish when he was born, maybe. So Rav Mari Bar Rachel, now this is a very interesting case. Mashkin Le'ahu gav harunachri beta, right? He lent money, Rav Mari Bar Rachel lent money to a non-Jew. And the non-Jew said, okay, I'll give you my house as a mashkon. Remember, as we discussed a lot last week, right? There's all kinds of different behaviors of a mashkon, but we're going to see in a second, a standard behavior was that you gave the non-Jew, in this case, the borrower, gave the mashkon to the lender, and the lender then lives in the house, right? Now, we had issues last week about whether that was rebit or not, whether that's extra, but with the non-Jew, of course, those issues are not nearly as concerning. So that was the situation. Rav Mari was living in the house. The guy owed him money, okay? However, Hadr Zavna the Rava, the non-Jew sold the house to Rava. We're going to see Rava didn't know that Rava knew that Rav Mari was living there, but he assumed Rav Mari was a renter. He didn't know that he was a mashkan holder, okay? So Rava now buys the house. Now, of course, it's a little problematic once Rava buys the house, because if Rava buys the house and Rav Mari is living there for free, it looks like he's profiting from the loan, right? So it says the Gemara, let's read inside, Natar Tracer Yarchishata, he waited 12 months, Rav Mari waited 12 months, and after 12 months, he didn't do anything for 12 months. After 12 months, he went to Rava and he said, here's my rent for the next year. Shakal Agar Beta, he took the value of renting the house, Amtile the Rava, and he came and brought it to Rava and said, okay, I know you bought this house from a non-Jew. I didn't pay you the last year, but for year number 2, here's my rent. Amar Lay, and he said to Rava, the reason I didn't pay rent till now is because I have this land, this house, as a mashkan. And stam mashkanta shata. The stam time in this neighborhood, which as we said last week, it's all based on the local custom. The stam time in this place was to have a house for a year. If you lend someone money and they give you their house as a mashkon, they cannot evict you. They cannot kick you out of it for a year, even if they paid back the loan, right? And as we said last week, once you have a situation like that, it's essentially not a loan, it's essentially a rental, right, or a purchase. So, if the non-Jew wanted to kick me out of the house before a year was up, he couldn't have. I had complete rights to the house. But now that a year's up, I don't have complete rights, and you could kick me out. And if I keep living here, I want to pay. Hashda lishko mar agar beta, so take my rent. Amar Lei, so Rava said, slow down. I'm not taking anything from you. Well, if I had known that you were not a renter, you were a person who owned a mashkon, I would have never bought the house. Tosfos sort of explains that, remember we had last week as well, that if you own a mashkin on a house, you get rights of what's called a bar mitzvah, of a landowner. So you get rights of first purchase, right? And Rava says, I would have never purchased it as one explanation, because you have the first rights to it. Or maybe
did the goy have the right to sell this land if he knew it was a collateral for the loan?
So yes, 100%. Tosfos actually discusses that at good length here. It's a good question. That meaning, but again, as Tosfos points out here, and we discussed this all last week a little bit. I mean, I'm sure it's still not clear to everyone, including me. But this essentially is like a rental, right? The way we view this mashkon, because you couldn't kick the person out, right? It's like a rental. So Tosfos points out from here, and this is not this sugya, is that if I rent my house to someone, I could then sell the house to somebody else, and the renter has a right to stay. But you're allowed to sell out a home that's occupied by somebody else as long as you don't impinge on their rights, right? So no one kicked Rav Mari bar Rachel out of the house, but the non-Jew sold it to Rava. But Rava did say, I would have never bought it had I known that it was there, because maybe you had a right to buy it first. But Hashta, now that I did buy it, and you're there, and you don't necessarily want to buy it from me, let's do it as it was when it was owned by a non-Jew. Meaning, as long as their halachot, which include not a problem of ribit, as long as you don't pay back the loan, you don't charge rent for the lender living in the house. So I also am not going to charge you until the non-Jew pays you back the loan. So you basically can live in the house as a mashkon, right? As long as the loan is still extant. Once he pays back the loan, then you got to start paying me rent because it's my house. Now, Amalei Rava mi Barnish to Rav Ashi. Rava mi Barnish said to Rav Ashi,
the renter doesn't have a lien on the house since the loan is, since it's the mashkon for the loan.
Meaning, that's a different question. It's a good question. Meaning, if the renter,
how does the non-Jew sell it with a lien on it?
Right. So meaning, if the borrower doesn't pay back, can Rav Mari bar Rachel collect the house as his payment? Probably, but that's not what he's trying to do here, right? He wants his loan back. So I guess whatever the term is, maybe it's 5 years, whatever time there might be. So, basically Rava bought this house, essentially, you're right, with a lien on it. But assuming that he ends up
I guess I'm confused. How did Rava not know there was a lien?
Yeah, I'm not really sure either.
Yeah, wasn't he supposed to check that there's a lien on the house before?
I agree with that. It seems either Rava didn't do his due diligence, or maybe Rava bought it at a cheap rate because he was like, as is, I mean, again, I don't know the circumstance. Maybe he bought it. You can buy something without the lien, right? You're allowed to buy without achrayut, as we said before, right? But I don't know the exact specifics here. Says,
also you're seeing that maybe the goy was trying to get out of some deal in some way by selling the house, and then he had the money to pay back the loan. I mean, it's a little, what's going on here?
Well, I mean, it'd be nice if he paid it back, but some people borrow money and don't pay it back, right?
But it wasn't a borrow. He sold it. He got money for it.
Right.
Yeah.
So, but again, the point here, the biggest question here is living in it rent-free. Amalei Rava mi Barnish to Rav Ashi. Now, Rava from Barnish said to Rav Ashi, we're around 12 lines from the top. Chazi mar Rabbanan, these rabbis nowadays, look, they ka'achli rabita. They seem to be going against all the rules of ribit. They seem to be eating interest. Why? The Yoav Zuzia Chamra b'Tishrei. You know what they used to do? They would give money to the winemaker in Tishrei, right? Tishrei is after you harvest your grapes, you make your barrels. The wine's going to be ready in a couple months. So they would go and give money and say, I want 5 barrels of wine. And then, they would go in Tevet and choose out 5 good barrels of wine. The problem, of course, is that some of the barrels of wine became bad, right? And so essentially, because they gave money in Tishrei, they now get to choose better quality wine in Tevet. So it seems like they're making money because they gave money earlier. They're making profit because they gave money earlier. Amar lahu, he said back to them, Amar le, he said, that's not ribit, because inu nami achamra kayav, achala lo kayav. They gave money to buy wine, not to buy vinegar, right? The fact is that's true. Some of the barrels that were there in Tishrei became vinegar, became, bad, spoiled. But meikara dechamra chamra dechala chala. The way it works is that a barrel gets bad. That happens based on conditions that are already present initially, right? It's the soil, not the seed, right? It's the opposite, whatever. It's the genetics, right? Meaning there's already bad bacteria and too much air and gas and whatever. And so they just didn't know it, right? You can't necessarily tell in Tishrei which barrels are going to go bad. But they're choosing the best ones when they come. But it's not that they bought 5 barrels and you're basically giving them 5 better ones. They bought wine, and you have a responsibility to give them wine. Ravina, Haviyav Zuzi B'nei Akra Deshanvata. Ravina used to give money to the people in Akra Deshanvata, which are like the Akra Shvata. Rashi says, I don't really know what words he means in French. He's got a French word here. Shavati says is a river. Akra, he uses a word.
It looks like he said contria in the
Country,
country.
but I don't know what that. I don't think that means country. Does he say? Miriam, do you know what that word means by any chance? He says here it means the fortress.
Kuntria?
I don't know how it means that.
No, I don't know.
Anyways,
Maybe
it was a building.
Cunetria. I don't know.
Anyways, this was a place that it was a wholesale market, right? So he would give them money in the beginning of the season and say, "Look, I'm paying you for 2 barrels of wine," and he'd pay them up front. And when he came basically and collected, they would overfill his bottle. They would give him extra, right? The shavchi lotfei kufita. They would give him a little bit extra. They would fill it up to the top. He didn't make a condition. They were like, they appreciated him. They gave him a little bit extra. So his question was, does that look like rebit? After the Kamei Deravashi, and Amalei Mishari said, is that permitted? I'm like, yeah, of course it's permitted. You didn't make a condition with them that because I'm paying early, you're going to give me extra. They can give you a gift. Anyone's allowed to give you a gift anytime they want. They like you. You're a nice guy. But you know what? Because it's not a condition, it's not a problem. Amalei, so then Ravina said, but I have another problem because I just found out that they don't even own the land. Right? These guys are selling me wine from a vineyard and they didn't actually buy this vineyard. You know what happened? The owner of the vineyard ran away and it was abandoned property and they started paying tax to the government. The government says whoever pays the taxes on abandoned property gets to use the property. So they paid taxes. They then harvest the land. They keep all the grapes and they sell it to me. Is that considered to be stolen material? Right? Amar le ha'ara lav detuhi. I found out that the land doesn't belong to them. Amrle, so he said back to him, that's not a problem either. Because Ara the Taska Mishabda, the land is Mishubad, is conditioned, is dependent on the tax. Meaning the government owns all the land. And the government says whoever pays the taxes owns the land. So if the original owner ran away and a new person comes and pays the taxes, then according to Dina de Malchuta Dina, they own the land. Malka Amar, the king said, meaning the government said, Man diyav taska leichel ara. Whoever pays the taxes gets to eat from the land. And so therefore, although they don't really own the land, because the owner ran away and they're paying taxes, it's theirs from halacha of Dina de Malchuta Dina.
So they paid the taxes then. These people took the land, they paid the taxes.
That's correct. They go and they...
I see. What's Rashi said, pouring mas lamelech.
Amarle Rav Papa the Rava. Rav Papa said Rav on a similar note. Chazi Marhani Rabbanan, look at these rabbis. They're terrible. The Yahav Zuze Akarga de Inchi. Look, remember there used to be this cargo was the head tax. I think there's another names for it. But basically in some jurisdictions, the government would make a rule that everyone has to pay, $1,000 a year. A lot of people couldn't afford to do it. So what the rabbis would do, this does not give them a great name, is they had money, they had capital, they would pay $1,000, but then they would make that person work for them. Rashi has 2 different versions here, or Tosafos 2 different versions. One is that they would make that person work for them and also pay them back $1,000. So they made extra, or they made them work for them $1,500 worth. I mean, they made them work extra, but they didn't make them pay back. But either way, they took more money. That's whether you have the word tfei or not. Just goes through the different gear. So they took them and they made them give them back extra, right? So that seems to be interest, right? They're basically paying the tax for them and they're collecting more than what they paid. Amar Lo, he said to them, it's not a problem. Hashta, he said, this is Rava said, Hashta, look, have I died? I would never be able to answer this question for you. I'm not sure why he said that. No, I would never be able to tell you something that I forgot to tell you that I heard from Rav Sheshet. The responsibility for these people, meaning the tax responsibility, or Rashi's Morkayu means basically their deed of servitude. Right, meaning their ability to be independent people is really conditioned on their king. Betufsa de Malka Manach, that sits in the treasury of the government. And Malka Amar and the government said, Mandelo Yav Karga, if you don't pay your taxes, the Shtaba de Mand Yav Karga, you become a slave. You have to work basically for one who does pay your taxes. So basically, it's not that you're lending them $1,000 and they're paying you back more. You're relying on the dina de malchuta dina, again, Rashi says, the government says this is the rule. If you don't pay your taxes, you either can pay $1,000 or work for somebody else. But working for somebody else ends up incurring a greater responsibility. Rav Soram, Achva de Rava. Now, Rav Soram, the brother of Rava, Havitakif Inishlo Mali, he would, if there were people at shul maybe talking during davening or something, I'm joking. There were people who were not well behaved. They weren't, whatever practices they had that were questionable. He would grab them and Ma'alhu beGehorka de Rava. He would put them in the Gehorka, the chariot, or what do you call that when you carry someone? Is it English there?
A litter.
Oh boy, I didn't even know that word. Litter?
Yeah, Litter.
Right, so Rava, I guess would have to be carried around, or that was his taxi, and he would force these people to stand there and carry him, right? Meaning he forced them to work because they weren't, being good people. Amalei Rava, and Rava said, of course, Rava was benefiting from this, from his brother, but Rava said, Shapir ka'avdid, it's appropriate. The Tanina, because we learned in a Braita, Re'ita she'eno nohei kishura, you see someone acting against all social norms, how do you're allowed to enslave that person? It's not literally enslaving, but make them work for you. Talmud the pasuk says, this is a quote, the olam behem tavodu. Pasuk actually says, those who are non-Jews, you can make them be servants, and achechem b'nei Yisrael, you cannot. But we read the pasuk as the olam behem tavod, you can make them work for you, and achechem b'nei Yisrael, you can make your friends b'nei Yisrael also work for you. You might think that's true even if they act appropriately. And when we read the pasuk, the following: a person with his brother, and we always darshan, a brother means you act like a brother, right? Meaning someone who acts in the right way, you're not allowed to enslave them. But someone who's acting inappropriately, you're allowed to make them work for you, either for free or for not. It's not the point. But the point, at least according to the Rambam and the sugya, as the Gra brings him here, is that there's a prohibition of making someone work beferach for you, work hard for you. But if they are acting inappropriately, that prohibition does not apply. Let's read. Can we have 5 more minutes, even though it's midnight? We got it. Amrle, Rav Chama.
Everyone's talking there.
Sorry?
No, I just heard the background noise.
Oh, okay. I don't know if someone's not muted. Amar of Chama. We are now again 8 to 10 lines from the bottom. Let's say a guy goes to his friend and says, tomorrow morning they have this great auction of wine. Here's my money. Go buy me wine at the auction. It's a great deal. And the guy, Pasha, he's negligent, blows oven. He doesn't buy him anything. He oversleeps. Okay. So what happens? Does the person have to pay you back? You basically lost out an opportunity to buy wine at a good rate. So says the Gemara, Mishalim like the Ka'aza a parvata de Shpat. That guy has to make it up to you and basically find you wine or pay the difference according to the rate in parvata de Shpat. Parvata means a port, right? Of Zoshpat, which is somewhere where, I don't know where that is exactly. I have no idea where that is, but they had a huge wine market. And basically, whenever you have a huge wine market, wine is cheap, right? So this guy was supposed to get it for you. He was poshe and didn't get it for you. He's got to make it up for you. He's got to get you wine at a cheap rate or pay you the difference. So Amar Meimar, so now Meimar said, look, Amrita Shmaita Kamedu Rav Zid Marda. I said this over in front of Rav Zid Minaharda. And Amar, he said, I just want to point out, Kika Amar Rav Chama, when Rav Chama said, and you've got to make it up to the guy, Hani Mili, if you say to him, Yayin Stam, meaning you say to him, go tomorrow and buy me 10 bottles of wine, right? So because he would have had a chance to buy it from you in the cheap rate, except he overslept, he can't get it, it's no longer available, he's got to get it for you at the good rate. But if you say to him, Yayin Zet, if you say, they're having a big sale on 92 Barkan, whatever, get me this specific wine, and the guy oversleeps and doesn't go, he doesn't have to make it up to you. You know why? Low. Because there's no guarantee he would have been able to buy it. You wanted something very specific. It's certainly possible he would have, if he had not been negligent and overslept, he might have shown up there and still not got it for you, right? So the damage is not guaranteed. The damage is a safek. But from a safek, you can't require him to pay you money. You might not ever hire him again, but you can't require him to pay you money. And Rav Ashi says, Rashi says it's not true. Afilu yayin stam namilo. Even if you say, I disagree with the whole halacha. Even if you say to him, buy me wine, and he sleeps and he's negligent, he doesn't buy it for you, you can't make him pay the difference. Why? My taima is asmachti. it's an asmachta. And Rashi points out, and this is what the Gemara clearly means, even if you said to him, buy me wine, and if you don't get it for me, you have to make it up for me. If you didn't make a kinyan, you didn't actually physically make that a formal thing, then as we discussed a lot last week, that's just, he relied on you. But asmachta lo kanya, relying on someone, just saying words is not enough to make a kinyan, and he didn't have to pay you, he didn't take it 100% seriously. Says the Gemara, well, what about the following case? This is a Mishnah we're going to have later in the Masechet, L'Ravashi, there's a Mishnah later, this is all the way towards the end. The Mishnah talks about a case of a sharecropper, right? I go to someone and say, you can have my land for the summer. You have to pay me a third of the crops, let's say. And guess what? I come back at the end of the year and the guy says, I changed my mind. I got a better job. I never worked your field, right? So now I gave him my field to work and he didn't do it. And he said, now we're quoting the Mishnah, Im avir ovir velo avid, if I am lazy and I leave, doesn't mean lazy, it means if I leave the field fallow and I don't work the field, ashalem b'meitava, I will pay you the best, meaning the sharecropper gave a guarantee. He said, give me your field, because obviously you would have given it to someone else. If I then end up not working your field because I get a better opportunity, I will still pay you. And the Mishnah says you have to pay. So why is that different than the asmachta of the wine? If I say to you, give me, I'll buy wine for you tomorrow morning. If I oversleep, I'll get it for you at that rate anyways. And interesting where it's different because hatam biyado. There, doing a field, if you had not been lazy, you could have or chosen another job, you could have worked the field. It was completely within your hands to work the field, right? Now, it might have not grown. But if you're a sharecropper and nothing grows, you don't have to pay what would have grown, right? But hacha, top of daf ayin daled, lav biyado. Here, whenever you buy wine, you're relying on somebody else. You're automatically relying on somebody else. And everybody knows that there's a chance that you'll show up at the wine store the next morning and there'll be no wine available, or someone's going to pay a higher rate, or whatever. The circumstances could change. And therefore, when you said, if I don't get it for you, I'll pay you, you didn't really mean it because it's not completely in your control. Now, remember, as we said last week, if you make a kinyan, none of that applies, right? If I actually do something, then a smachta is kan, right? The kanu biyados we had last week. But if you didn't make a kinyan, the smachta means nothing. But with the field, it does mean something because since you're capable of doing it, you accept responsibility. And if you don't do it, you're going to pay. And we will stop there, top of daf ayin daled.
Once he makes a kinyan, is it really an asmachta?
No, it's not.
It's not then. It's not an asmachta. Then it's a kinyan.
Correct. But I mean, so again, correct. It's not. That's why it works. It's not real asmachta. Tomorrow, I don't know if this doesn't work for you. We have to learn in the morning because there's a thing at night. I think we're all going. I'm going to at the Yom HaZikaron thing. So it's not personal. I'm sorry. You're muted, Mary.
Sorry, I get it. It's like, no, I have class tomorrow, so it's all right. It is what it is.
We'll try for next week. We'll see what next week brings.
Okay. All right.
Shavua tov, everyone.
Shavua tov. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
I know.